Happy New Year's, ladies and gentlemen, Allincrypto here, and welcome back, guys, for what is going to be your first jam-packed daily market update of 2025. This is going to be a monumental year. This is the year that crypto officially goes mainstream. And what I mean by that is actually gets used and implemented by the traditional financial system and, of course, all the other sectors that it is fundamentally revolutionizing. So a happy new year to each and every one of you. As this is our first daily market update of the year, the first place I want to start is with technically looking at Bitcoin and some crypto related charts to help us understand what we think is to come. And we've very much been singing the same tune. We've really pushed back on some of the short-term fear that we saw sort of going into the new year on what was potentially an inverse head and shoulders. And we've said it's a very dangerous place to be in regards to betting against the trend, because if you think the market's going to go down, okay, you can sell your crypto and hope to buy lower, but what happens if it doesn't? And I think we've seen with altcoins just how momentous the moves can be, and actually that can, in many cases, lead you, if you get it wrong, to be or diminish your crypto holdings for what is very clearly an uptrend in a bull market. And we'll talk about all that to start the video off. Then we're going to look at some interesting news as it relates to the IRS. So there was a lot of things on Twitter yesterday talking about how the IRS is essentially not going to tax the cryptocurrency space until 2026. And I don't believe that this is the case. I do think America's going to have far better tax as it relates to crypto, but more broadly than the likes of the UK, where I am. We're currently living in a George Orwellian nightmare here in the UK. And I say that with all seriousness, even though we're maybe being a bit light-hearted about it. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's kick off your first daily market update of 2025. And let's start off with a Bitcoin chart. Bitcoin is the daddy. It's the tide that still rises and sinks all ships. You can really look at Bitcoin dominance. And if we think Bitcoin dominance is perhaps coming down to that 40% level, actually that's bullish for Bitcoin, but bullish for the entire space, certainly the altcoin sector more broadly. And our bet on investing in crypto has always been that altcoins will outperform Bitcoin. And that is actually coming to fruition with many of the picks that, of course, I've shared here publicly, but also behind the sort of walls of Patreon. It's 2025. If you've not considered becoming a Patreon, guys, now is the time to do so. But when we look at the Bitcoin chart, first of all, just to address the very evident trend that we're currently in. So what we're looking at is this here. This is a very pronounced, strong, and dominant uptrend. And to bet against that, I believe, is foolish. There's been many points in Bitcoin's history of this uptrend where we've had similar patterns or a similar short-term pattern to what we had previously. And actually, in an uptrend, the vast majority of those are going to, you don't want to go against the trend. You want as many things on your side as possible. And ultimately, the fact that you're in an uptrend means from where I'm sat until there's an invalidation of it, you want to expect that continuation. So on top of that, we also have a concession of technical patterns. Some have been met, some are still to be met. So we've got an inverse head and shoulders, the neckline, of course, being around your 48K. That's going to take you to around about 150K. We've got potentially a broader cup and handle. We looked at this pre the break into sort of new all-time highs and the run to 100K. And we've got bull flags. And we've got a number of other things that lead us to be bullish on Bitcoin on the technical side of things. So we expect that to come to fruition when multiple things point in the same direction. And we use the phrase, when it walks, talks, and quacks like a duck. It's very likely a duck. And ultimately, Bitcoin is going to drag the whole space forward. There was a lot of concern in regards to, and I was doing this with my Patreons, a short-term head and shoulder. So we'll go right down to the 4-hourly. And we'll take a look at this. A lot of people very worried about this turning into a head and shoulders. You've got the likes of Peter Brand and many of the good technical traders out there identifying the pattern. And I think this caused a lot of fear. And one thing that we made sure to say was, okay, well, what do you do with this information? There's that saying out there, knowledge is power. I actually believe that that's not the case. I know so many knowledgeable people that have just simply done nothing with their lives because they've never put it into action. The question always has to be is, with the knowledge that you've got, what are you going to do with it? And if you're going to do nothing with it, well, you could of course derive a number of things from that. But enough of the philosophical nonsense. One thing that I did, and it was a great exercise with my patrons, was because I believe that bigger time frame structure will trump smaller time frame structure, or at least go against it. and you want to go with what's more probable, we looked at this inverse head and shoulders, and we actually looked at many other examples of what could have been similar patterns that ultimately played out very differently. Of course, we're going through these sort of March pullback here, but you can see some of these head and shoulders that were really against the broader trend, which is an uptrend, something like phase 2, or what we look at as phase 2 in our phase sort of analysis of markets. Markets move cyclically. The reason being is because they're driven by human beings. Ultimately, we said that this sort of small head and shoulders that Bitcoin was forming for us wasn't enough to bet the farm on and potentially be wrong on and lose a chunk of our portfolio in doing so. Of course, risk management is important, but I find with crypto, actually what you're dealing with is a entirely separate beast to the traditional financial system, and it can be quite hard to apply traditional risk management, in my own opinion, and it is just an opinion, when it comes to the crypto space. And that's why I think actually understanding how markets move cyclically and the bigger trend is important. You want to ride that. And we have every reason to believe that Bitcoin, going back to what we said at the start of the video, is in an uptrend and is going to continue to be in one, not only based on the fact that you are in a very strong, pronounced uptrend, but also in the sense that actually we've got a number of confluencing technical patterns. And then we've got the likes of the total cryptocurrency market cap. Again, we've got a confluence of technical patterns. It's also in an uptrend. The total 2, which is everything excluding Bitcoin and or just Bitcoin. Total 3 is everything excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then we've got others. We have technical patterns on all of these, all pointing to upside. And Bitcoin, of course, has that on its own merit, but ultimately, these other markets are very much confirming what we're looking at when it relates to Bitcoin. And then we've got ETPs, miners, etc., etc., etc. Did a lot of homework, also altcoins in their own individual merit. So we're very, very bullish on the markets for 2025. And what we've spoken about there, or what we've outlined, is technically why we're bullish. Fundamentally, this technology is truly revolutionizing many sectors out there, including money itself. And ultimately, we've got this great story of Trump coming into office. That takes place on the 20th, so we're 17 days away from that. You know, Elon talking about launching X payments. This has been a vision of theirs for a long time. We'll be doing a video on that and what cryptos we think are involved, because he might have had actually some early involvement in some of these cryptos to begin with. You've got the likes of Peter Thiel popping up and a number of others. But there's this great fundamental narrative for the cryptocurrency space. And I think that very much accompanies what we're looking at technically. So we're long and strong. We remain that. We're not focused on short-term price action. We really want to capture the majority of the trend without trying to be too smart and calling every top and bottom, local top and bottom within what's a broader uptrend. So very bullish on the crypto space. I think you've got a sensational year ahead of you. One thing that I wanted to address, there's so much I could have put in this video, but I wanted to just make this a little bit simple as it's the start of 2025 and really outline what my opinion on the markets are. Technically sound looking market for continuation to the upside. Fundamentally, I mean, you know, you don't want to get too into the sort of fundamental side of things, in my opinion, because it can often be dreams of grandeur. One thing that I also want to address, and had to sort of take a lot of news segments out of here, is this was all around Twitter yesterday. No more crypto taxes. And of course, this is in reference to what allegedly the IRS essentially implemented. Just in, IRS delays crypto tax reporting requirements until 2026. Now, here in the UK, if you're using any of those exchanges, you'd have noticed all the questionnaires and all these things that they are now collecting data on you. And ultimately, you will have to report your taxes. This seemed a little bit off to me at the time. And there was actually a great tweet that was done, or a great thread on Twitter that was done by David Camaria. Probably not saying that right. Crypto tax chaos. Did the IRS delay crypto taxes until 2026? Confused by the rumor on Twitter and X. Here's the real scoop on the latest IRS development and what this means for you. No, the IRS did not delay crypto tax reporting for investors until 2026. Rather, IRS Notice 2025-7 states that users of centralized exchanges can still use a specific ID accounting method when calculating gains and losses for 2025. In prior rulings, the IRS stated that starting in 2025, cryptos sold on centralized exchanges must be tracked by the exchange and reported to the IRS. If the user does not specifically identify which unit of crypto they want to sell prior to making the, let's just open this up, prior to making the transaction on exchange. The exchange must default to FIFO, first in, first out, when calculating the gains and losses. To no one's surprise, exchanges haven't yet been able to build the features which would allow investors to do this, i.e. allow investors to specifically identify the tranche of crypto they want to sell before selling. This means that virtually all crypto investors would be defaulted into FIFO reporting for crypto sold on their centralized exchanges. Given the bull market we're in, this dramatically increases an investor's capital gains as their earliest and likeliest lowest cost. With this notice, investors can continue to use a specific ID accounting method for sales on CEXs, so centralized exchanges, even though they did not actually communicate with their exchange prior to the transaction. As long as an investor is maintaining accurate records with their own books, they can account for sales happening within their CEXs with a specific ID method. The rule provides a grace period for 2025, the year of 2025, after which exchanges will have to abide by the original ruling. What does this mean for Safe Harbor? Do you still think, or do you still have to migrate away from a universal cost basis tracking for 2025? Yes, etc., etc. So the scoop isn't that the IRS have made it so that you don't have to report anything you've made or lost in crypto until 2025, like many on Twitter would have had you believe. It's just they've changed a rule, or sort of given a grace period to implementing a new rule to 2026. So unfortunately, guys, you are still going to have to account for the cryptos that you've made money on. Hopefully that you, well, as I said, hopefully if you've made losses, you can sort of weigh them up against. They're never going to allow people to make money on an asset tax-free, even though you've already paid tax on the money that you're investing, and really it should be none of their business. But we can talk all day long about the corrupt natures, or the corrupt nature of government. So that's really it from me, guys. We wanted to start things off on our technical assessment of the markets, taking a look at 2025, and we also wanted to deliver a little bit of clarity perhaps on what's taking place with the IRS, because and I always stay away from any kind of tax advice. I'm not a registered accountant. I'm not a tax advisor. I'm not a legal anything. I never ever talk about taxes. And I think influencers should stay away from that subject, because if you get it wrong, or the information that you put out is wrong, you can damage a hell of a lot of people. You know, if you tell people that people don't have to account their tax in 2026, and the IRS come after you and say, okay, well, what was going on in 2025? And you say, oh, well, this influencer told me I didn't have to do that. They're not going to buy that. You're going to be the one that suffers, unfortunately. That's it from me, guys. We're technically very bullish, fundamentally very bullish, every which way bullish. We look forward to bringing lots of content on all the great things happening within the crypto space. See you all in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year, and I'll see you soon.